The United States Coast Guard will deploy its North Pacific assets to support the Philippine Coast Guard in upholding its sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea amid the looming implementation of China's anti-trespassing policy, which encroaches on the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. As the Southeast Asian country faces growing Chinese pressure in the South China Sea, the Philippines has agreed to buy 5 Coast Guard patrol ships from Japan in a deal worth more than 23.8 billion pesos, and the ships will be delivered in 2027. The Coast Guard from the Philippines, Japan and the United States have reasserted their commitment to keeping the West Philippine Sea free, safe, and secure. This occurred during the Shangri-La Dialogue for International Institute for Strategic Studies on its 21st Asia Security Summit in Singapore, mid this year. Meanwhile, the Japan Coast Guard proposed the conduct of more personnel exchanges to create a robust network of Coast Guard counterparts in pursuit of maritime law enforcement and rule of law. The Philippine Coast Guard said it has agreed with the United States and Japan Coast Guard to pursue capacity-building initiatives to strengthen people-to-people relationship, better synchronize doctrines on the ground, and develop trust with each other. The United States Coast Guard has promised to send assets to the South China Sea to support Manila in upholding sovereign rights in its exclusive economic zone. In a statement, the USCG will deploy its North Pacific Coast Guard following the proposal of Admiral Ronnie Gil Gavin for a greater deployment in high seas to address the forthcoming threat. As China suppose trespasses in what it considers its maritime boundaries. The proposal was made not only to the U.S. Coast Guard, but also to the Japan Coast Guard during the International Institute for Strategic Studies Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. The Philippines rest assured its partners that the PCG is doing its share in the alliance they nurture. The Coast Guards from the Philippines and the United States made an historic joint maritime patrol in the contested waters of West Philippine Sea, as one of China's monster ships reportedly intruded into Philippines' exclusive economic zone. U.S. Coast Guard cutter Waish, WMSL 751, and BRP Melchora Aquino, MRRV 9702, held a bilateral search and rescue exercise in the South China Sea on July 17. These serve as a response and to closely monitor a China Coast Guard vessel that came close to Lubang Island over the past few days. The 2 Coast Guard maritime patrol also successfully concluded a joint passing exercise. The exercise focused on simulating various scenarios, including search and rescue, firefighting, communication exercises, and medical evacuation. Additional activities included personnel transfer and a joint sail. As the Southeast Asian country faces growing Chinese pressure in the South China Sea, the Philippines has agreed to buy 5 Coast Guard patrol ships from Japan in a deal worth more than 23.8 billion pesos, and the ships will be delivered in 2027. Japan will loan the Philippines 64.3 billion yen or around $413 million to buy the 5 97-meter multi-role response vessels, and Japan will pay for the development of the required support facilities. This will support the PCG in improving its capabilities for maritime operations, particularly in addressing transnational crimes and the aggressive China stint in the West Philippine Sea. These ships are the same size as the biggest one currently in the Philippine Coast Guard fleet. The Philippine Coast Guard currently has 2 97-meter patrol vessels, as part of a fleet seen as insufficient for patrolling waters around the vast archipelago nation. In recent months, its vessels have been involved in several collisions with Chinese Coast Guard ships around disputed reefs in the South China Sea, which Beijing claims almost entirely. Philippine Coast Guard boats have also been fired on with water cannons by the China Coast Guard, with the latest incident happening on April 30th near the China-controlled Scarborough Shoal. The triangular chain of reefs and rocks that make up Scarborough Shoal lies 240 kilometers or 150 miles west of the Philippines' main island of Luzon and nearly 900 kilometers from Hainan, the nearest major Chinese landmass. To further strengthen the bilateral maritime cooperability of the Philippine and United States, the Philippine Navy is also studying the possibility of conducting a rotation and reprovision mission to 2nd Thomas Shoal, as part of a multilateral maritime cooperative activity with allied countries in the South China Sea. In such scenario, a resupply mission could be part of a multilateral exercise involving several nations, in which vessels and aircraft from partnered countries such as the US, Japan, UK, and Australia could conduct simultaneous patrols with Philippine forces in the South China Sea, while Manila is conducting a resupply mission. All options are being discussed on the planning table. Once finalized, this will be submitted for approval, said Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad, Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea. The U.S. Embassy assured that they will coordinate with the country on a wide array of issues of shared concern as allies of the Philippines. The United States has expressed its commitment to help the Philippines in what it needs, particularly to ensure successful rotation and reprovision missions to Filipino troops on the grounded BRP Sierra Madre. Kanishka Gangopadhyay, spokesman for the U.S. Embassy in Manila, said that as allies, the United States and the Philippines coordinate on a wide array of issues of shared concern. This pronouncement came as the Philippine Navy said it is eyeing to use of an American unmanned aircraft system to carry out resupply missions in 2nd Thomas Shoal and avoid getting harassed by Chinese maritime forces. In a press conference, Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad, Philippine Navy spokesman for the West Philippine Sea, confirmed that U.S. Marines tested their tactical resupply unmanned aircraft system during 2 recent military exercises earlier this year. The Philippines is considering all types of options, Trinidad said when asked if the Philippine Navy is eyeing to acquire the same U.S. drone system for the resupply mission in Ayungin Shoal. According to the U.S. Marine Corps, their 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit employed a tactical resupply unmanned aircraft system in Palawan during the Balakadan exercise in April and during the Archipelagic Coastal Defense Continuum in May. The tactical resupply unmanned aircraft system, according to the U.S. Marine Corps, is a Class 3 unmanned aerial system which can deliver critical supplies to remote and inaccessible areas with unprecedented speed and precision. On July 16, Coast Guard from the United States and Philippines successfully concluded a joint passing exercise near Lubang Island. The exercise involved the PCG's BRP Melchora Aquino and the USCG Cutter Waish, sharing similar mandates, values, and objectives of protecting lives at sea and maintaining a rules-based maritime order. This exercise highlights the closer and expanding relations between the Coast Guards of the 2 allied nations. The exercise aims to strengthen maritime cooperation and interoperability between the 2 Coast Guard services in the areas of maritime safety and environmental protection. The passing exercise focused on simulating various scenarios, including search and rescue, firefighting, communication exercises, and medical evacuation. By sharing best practices, concepts, doctrines, and standard operating procedures, the PCG and USCG enhance their respective capabilities to respond to maritime emergencies and contingencies. The joint exercise underscores the commitment of both Coast Guards to their vital role in safeguarding lives at sea, promoting maritime security, and protecting the marine environment. The PCG, alongside its partners and allies in the USCG, will continue to expand their collaboration and jointly strengthen their capabilities to effectively respond to maritime contingencies and promote a safe, secure, and peaceful rules-based maritime order. China protested as the Philippines and Japan signed a reciprocal access agreement to counter China's aggression in the region. The signing was witnessed by officials from the Department of Finance, the Department of Transportation, and the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Tokyo is a top provider of overseas development assistance to the Philippines. Japan invaded and occupied the Philippines during World War II, but the 2 countries have since grown closer due to trade and investment, and more recently, to counter China's assertiveness in the region. As part of efforts to deepen their security cooperation, Manila and Tokyo are negotiating a defense pact that would allow the countries to deploy troops on each other's territory. Leaders of Japan and the Philippines, both longtime allies of the United States, were in Washington last April for a trilateral summit with U.S. President Joe Biden. Tensions over the South China Sea, combined with saber-rattling over China's claims to the self-governing island of Taiwan, have prompted Biden to boost alliances in the region. Beijing claims most of the waterway, brushing off rival claims from other countries, including the Philippines, and an international ruling that its assertion has no legal basis. Beijing last month protested as the Philippines and Japan signed a defense pact, seen to be a countermove against China's aggressive posturing in the region. Lin Jian, the foreign ministry spokesman, called it as small circles that would encourage a new Cold War and provoke confrontation. China's foreign ministry pointed out Japan's history of occupation in the region, noting that Tokyo should seriously reflect on its history of aggression and act cautiously in the field of military security. According to Victor Gao, one of China propagandist and a member of Revolutionary Committee of Chinese Kuomintang, published by Global Times.
It is reported that Japan and the Philippines signed an agreement called RAA Agreement, which allowed troops of each country to be stationed in the other country, allegedly for military training and other auxiliary purposes. This is a very serious development because it is apparently designed against China. I think most of the countries in our part of the world suffered from the atrocities of the Japanese fascists in the Second World War. And, for example, the occupation of Singapore, Malaysia, and the Indonesian and the Philippines, and many Pacific Island regions. Now, this is a fact. No one should forget that. And forgetting this history of Japanese occupation atrocities and crimes against humanity is an injustice in itself. It applies to the Philippines at the same time. And I think there is a duty for the Filipino government to really always remind the people in the Philippines of what the Japanese fascists did in the Second World War. And don't forget all these crimes against humanity, including, for example, the sudden attack on Pearl Harbor.
During World War II, Japan was seriously responsible for its aggression and colonial rule against Southeast Asian countries, including the Philippines. China is right about the painful history of the Japanese reciprocal occupation in the Philippines. But China deliberately skipped the sustained strong bilateral ties between the Philippines and Japan through the years amid swings in Philippine politics. Tokyo has proven to be a consistent and reliable part for Manila, be it in upgrading security and defense capabilities, working on peace, infrastructure development, and economic investment. The Philippine Coast Guard's newest vessels were acquired from and through Japan. The Philippine military's newest mobile air surveillance radar system is also from Japan, and Manila is the first ever recipient of its official development assistance. Manila finds Tokyo's consistency as a political capital not just to accept. They are no longer the demons of the days of the Second World War, but possibly as a guardian angel of today's Indo-Pacific. World War II was already long overdue for China to live in the past. Japan is an ally of peace since then, and no longer the threat in Asia-Pacific. Unlike China, with its military posturing in East and South China Sea, including sovereign right of Japan and Philippines claiming as its own, China is now becoming a threat for peace and stability, not just in Asia-Pacific but in the world. According to China, the Asia-Pacific region does not need military blocs, let alone small groupings that instigate bloc confrontation or a new Cold War. Any action that undermines regional peace and stability, unity and cooperation will arouse vigilance and opposition of the people in the region. Exchanges and cooperation between two countries should not jeopardize mutual understanding and trust among countries in the region, should not undermine regional peace and stability, and should not target or harm the interests of a third party.
The RAA is a bilateral agreement between Japan and the Philippines. So it is a matter internal to Japan and the Philippines. So it is actually none of China's business, because China would then be interfering in the internal affairs of both Japan and the Philippines. If I state a comment regarding something that, for example, their economic coercive diplomacy or whatnot, they would say that I'm interfering in their internal affairs. Same thing here.